America is watching. Now, Mr. Chairman, I felt it was important to get these comments on the record on this debate tonight. However, I'm told that due to Clause 2 and Rule 21 that a point of order will be raised on my amendment, and therefore I ask unanimous consent to withdraw it at this time, and I yield back.
Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. Clerk will continue to read. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey?
Speaker, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, abortion is always coercive for the child in the womb. An unborn baby girl or boy has no say, no right to refusal, no means to protest, no veto power whatsoever concerning a procedure that violently tears that child's body to pieces and effectuates the kill by lethal injection or starvation by RU-46. In China, that coercion is extended by brute force to all women. Any mother caught without explicit government authorization to give birth is coerced to abort her baby. Since 1979, Mr. Speaker, brothers and sisters have been illegal in China as part of the barbaric one-child-per-couple policy. And for 30 years, the United Nations Population Fund has vigorously supported, funded, defended, promoted, and even celebrated these massive crimes against humanity. Under Presidents Reagan, Bush 1 and Bush, and even 1 year under President Clinton, UNFPA was barred from receiving U.S. funding because of their shameful support and co-management of China's forced abortion policy. My concern this morning is an amendment that had been printed in the record but not offered. At least it has not been offered at this setting. I expect we'll see it later. That would compel every American taxpayer to furnish $55 million to the UNFPA, an organization that unapologetically stood not with oppressed women, but with the oppressors of women, an organization that has made the Chinese killing machine more efficacious and lethal, an organization that has systematically whitewashed and defended these crimes against humanity. The UNFPA is not only an essential part of the planning and training of the Chinese cadres who run this anti-woman, anti-child program, but the UNFPA assists in the implementation of it in several counties as well. The uncontested facts are these. Any Chinese, Tibetan, or Uyghur mother without a birth allowed certificate is forced to abort. All unwed moms are compelled to abort. And what can only be described as a search and destroy mission, disabled children are forcibly aborted as part of a nationwide eugenics program. Each day, family planning cadres impose huge, what they call, compensation fees on any woman who lacks permission to give birth or evades detection, and many women have their children on the run. Ruinous fines from 1 to 10 times the combined annual salaries of both parents, plus jail, torture, property confiscation, loss of employment, loss of educational opportunities, housing and health care, are all weapons routinely employed by the so-called family planning cadres to ensure compliance with the one-child-per-couple policy. In denying U.S. funds to the UNFPA in 2008, Deputy Secretary of State John Negroponte wrote, and I quote, "China's birth limitation program retains harshly coercive elements in law and practice, including coercive abortion and involuntary sterilization." The number 2 at the State Department said it is illegal in almost all provinces for a single mom to bear a child. The State Department noted that Chinese law is, quote, "the foundation of its coercive policies and practices," and that the UNFPA comports with and adheres to that Chinese law. Mr. Speaker, the UNFPA-supported one-child-per-couple policy has led to the worst gender disparity in any nation in all of human history. Where are the missing girls in China? Dead, Mr. Speaker, murdered because they were female, systematically destroyed over 30 years by sex selection abortion. Today, there are as many as 100 million missing girls in China. Gendercide, the evil twin of genocide. The societal implications of the UNFPA-supported one-child-per-couple policy are absolutely staggering. According to the World Health Organization, about 500 Chinese women commit suicide every single day. China has become a magnet for sex trafficking, in large measure because of the missing girls. An estimated 40 million men won't be able to find wives by 2020 because for 30 years and counting, girls have suffered the ultimate gender discrimination, sex selection abortion. A little over a year ago, Mr. Speaker, I convened a congressional hearing on China's one-child-per-couple policy.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And,
Gentleman yields back.
I am consent to revise and extend my remarks.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York rise?
I rise to strike the last word.
Gentlewoman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I had not intended to speak my colleagues on this issue, but I do feel that my friend, the gentleman, does deserve a response to clarify the facts and to talk to this body about why funding for UNFPA is so important. First of all, I fervently believe that UNFPA is essential to achieving our global health goals. UNFPA's family planning and reproductive health activities are key elements of global health and contribute to the U.S. comprehensive strategy for sustainable development. UNFPA improves the reproductive and maternal health of women around the world through the implementation of effective voluntary family planning policies and programs. It is the largest multilateral provider of family planning and reproductive health information and services with programs in nearly 150 countries. The U.S. government's partnership with UNFPA leverages funds for these health programs, including the reduction of maternal mortality, promotion of the human rights of women, including those affected by conflict and natural disasters, and extends the reach of U.S. government support to a number of countries where U.S. aid does not have programs. UNFPA works with governments to develop and strengthen laws and national capacities to promote women's equality, the prevention of gender-based violence, including in refugee and conflict situations. Improving the health and well-being of populations in other countries, especially those of women and children, promotes internal stability and social and economic progress. And I would like to remind my colleagues that the Kemp-Kasten Amendment prohibits funding for, quote, any organization or program which is determined by the President of the United States supports or participates in the management of a program of coercive abortion or involuntary sterilization. We oppose China's coercive birth limitation policies. The facts show that UNFPA does not support or participate in the management of any program of coercive abortion or involuntary sterilization. In fact, UNFPA works to eliminate them. The Department concluded in 2009, based on review of available facts, that UNFPA does not engage in these activities. We continue to monitor UNFPA's programs, continue to believe that UNFPA's activities in China do not implicate Ken Kasten. As part of our due diligence, the Department sent a team to China to review UNFPA's program in June 2010, prior to the UNFPA Executive Board's renewal of the China Country Program. I yield back the balance.
The gentlewoman yields back.
Mr. Chairman.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
State of Kansas. Mr.
Kansas,
Chairman.
pardon me. Pardon.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I might yield my time to the congressman from New Jersey.
I'll just take a minute, Mr. Speaker, because the hour is late. The problem with the United Nations Population Fund's
Gentleman must remain on his seat.
activities in China is that it strictly adheres to Chinese law. Chinese law is a one-child-per-couple policy, and as a direct result in the clinics and in the programs that are run in the approximately 30 counties that the UNFPA oversees or has programs in or projects, in each and every one of those, they adhere to this one-child-per-couple policy. Yes, they may say you can choose to be sterilized or have an IUD insertion, one or the other, but you must have it. It is compulsory. It is involuntary. So they enforce the involuntariness, the compulsory nature, but they may give a choice as to what method a person may be able to follow. That is not voluntary. I would also point out that for 30 years, representatives of the UNFPA have said publicly, again and again and again, that the Chinese program is, quote, totally voluntary. Nothing, I would submit to my good friend and colleague from New York, could be further from the truth. There is nothing voluntary about this horrific program where women are treated like chattel. I have held 27 hearings as chairman of the Human Rights Committee of the Foreign Affairs Committee as a member of Congress. 27 hearings just on China. We have heard from numerous women who were forcibly aborted, and they told the story about how it was told to them this was a voluntary abortion. They were coerced. They had sessions with cadres that wore them down, and over time they submitted, feeling they had no way to fight back. I had a woman testify. Her name is Wujian. She recently got asylum right here in the United States. She had a well-founded fear of persecution based on the forced abortion policy. A student at a major university here. She testified through tears how she was forcibly aborted, rounded up with other women, and she said at the clinic, which was voluntary, all of this is voluntary according to UNFPA, there were moms crying, rolling on the floor, and she said when they killed her baby and severed the baby's limbs with scissors and a curette, that the nurse actually put a foot on her, near the top of her lapel, and she looked at the bloody foot and broke down crying. She could not finish her testimony. I'll provide that to the gentlelady if she'd like to see it. The UNFPA has enabled these crimes, and they are crimes against humanity. At the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal, forced abortion was properly construed to be a crime against humanity because it was employed by the Nazis against Polish women. I think people like Wei Jingsheng, Harry Wu, the great human rights activists, have all been very clear the one-child-per-couple policy is one of the worst violations, if not the worst, violations of human rights in scope and magnitude directed against women and, of course, the dead children who are the result. So, the UNFPA is a part of that. They defend it. And with all due respect to my good friend, this funding of an organization that says that this is a voluntary program must cease because they give tangible assistance. I met finally with Peng Pei-yung, the woman who runs the program, ran the program. Yeah, I was in Beijing on one of many human rights trips there. She said to me over and over again in that conversation, the UNFPA is here and they see no coercion. There's no coercion. So I thank my friend for yielding, and again, we should direct our monies to other organizations, NGOs, to USAID. And I would also point out, a dear colleague went out from some members on the other side of the aisle about obstetric fistula. I want to point out to my friends, I got a bill passed in this House back in 2005 that established a fistula repair program for women in the developing world. It passed. Failed over in the Senate, but it passed. I went to Ken Hill, who was then the Administrator of Health for USAID, and said, please take this and administratively put it into practice. We now have programs in 35 different programs in 12 countries. 15,000 African and Asian women have had fistula repairs as a direct result of this program. We need to funnel our money into maternal health care and other health care interventions that will aid women, especially those who suffer from such terrible things as obstetric fistula. So I thank my friend for yielding, and go back to the mountain. Oh, you got to go back.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, let me begin by congratulating the gentleman from New Jersey on his program to repair fistulas, which are a great problem for many women in the developing world. And I'll yield to the gentlelady from New York.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. And I also want to congratulate my friend for the important work that you're doing with regard to fistula. I've seen it. I know the suffering that women go through, and I thank you for your leadership on this issue. The hour is late. The gentleman and I have been talking about this issue for many, many years, and I'd be delighted to have a further discussion. But for the bill for the moment, I just want to close again by making it clear we oppose China's coercive birth limitation policies. And the facts show that UNFPA does not support or participate in the management of any programs of coercive abortion or involuntary sterilization. In fact, UNFPA works to eliminate them. And I think it's important to note again that in 150 countries that do not receive bilateral support in family planning, we have seen some very, very important work that actually saves women's lives. So I would like to say to the gentleman, as we are closing this debate, thank you for your good work. We can agree to disagree on this issue, but I think this is such an important program, and we have provided such invaluable help to women that I would hope that at some point we could agree on that. I yield back, and I thank the gentleman from New York for yielding, and I thank our chairwoman for your important work on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Clerk will continue to read.
Page 337, line 21, section 2124, subsections B through D of this section shall apply to funds appropriated by this division in lieu of section 7076 of Division F of Public Law 111-117. Title 12, Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development and Related Agencies. Sections 2201, the level for the Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration Operations, $9,523,028,000.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment number 511 at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will read one more paragraph.
Section 2202, the level for Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration facilities and equipment, $2,736,203,000.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
I have an amendment number 511 at the desk, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 511, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Nadler of New York.
Point of order is reserved.
Thank you.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The continuing resolution under consideration today includes very dangerous cuts to key transportation programs. This is exactly the wrong thing to do if we want to reduce unemployment, create jobs, and grow the economy. In a survey released by the American Public Transportation Association, 80% of private sector businesses surveyed indicated that the level of federal investment in public transportation has a large influence on their business revenues. For example, every $10 million in capital investment in public transportation yields $30 million, 3 times in increased business sales. The Texas Transportation Institute's 2010 Urban Mobility Report shows that worsening road congestion costs the nation $134 billion. $134 billion a year cost in lost productivity. And when it comes to transit alone, every $1 billion invested creates or supports 36,000 jobs. Despite the clear link between transportation funding and economic recovery, this continuing resolution cuts billions for transit, high-speed rail, roads, and other key infrastructure projects. The CR cuts over $8 billion from current infrastructure formula programs and already awarded projects, resulting in the loss of over 280,000 jobs from the current budget funding levels. These proposed cuts to transportation include $4.97 billion in high-speed and intercity passenger rail grants, $710 million in transit capital investment grants, $292 million in FHWA surface transportation priorities, $150 million for Amtrak, and $100 million in Federal Rail Administration rail safety technology grants. This amendment would eliminate these cuts and restore transportation funding to their current levels, not any increase for inflation, no increase for increased population, no increase for increased work, but simply to restore the current levels. We must restore these current levels because every dollar we cut reduces $3 in business activity, and every $1 billion we cut costs 36,000 jobs in an economy which cannot afford to lose tens of thousands of jobs. Unfortunately, the underlying bill cuts transportation funding so dramatically and other funding so dramatically that it is virtually impossible to write an amendment to restore transportation funding to current levels even that would be in order under the rules the House has adopted without causing great harm to other critical programs. This is particularly true since all the transportation funding programs and all the housing and urban development programs which are in this title are underfunded. So it's almost impossible to say, let's restore these transportation funds but eliminate other transportation or housing funds. In fact, this CR is such an irresponsible and reckless document that it is almost not worth trying to fix it. The Republicans have seized on this idea to cut $100 billion from the current budget, pulling that figure arbitrarily out of thin air and without any regard for what it could mean to our economy or to the services that our budget presents. It is a dangerous overreach that would be devastating for middle and working class Americans, would destroy tens, in fact hundreds of thousands of jobs without replacing them, and would threaten the national security. The transportation cuts are a small part of these irresponsible cuts. This amendment is a small part of opposing this dangerous continuing resolution, and I anticipate, unfortunately, that my amendment is going to be ruled out of order. I hope that's not the case. In a rational House, it would not be the case, but I urge my colleagues to support the amendment if they have the opportunity to do so, and in order to support reasonable transportation funding so as not to decimate this economy. If necessary, I urge them to vote against the entire CR. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Does the gentleman from Iowa continue to reserve his point of order? Gentleman continues to reserve his point of order. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate and thank the gentleman from New York for the statement that he has just made, because I think it represents the most rational thing that we could do with the transportation section of this legislation. But given the hour and understanding that we are not operating under rational rules on this issue, I will say only that I do congratulate and commend you for the statement that you have made, in which I virtually totally concur. I might find a word or two to disagree with in the usage there, but I concur with it, and I yield back my time.
One yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Iowa rise?
Mr. Chairman, the amendment proposes a net increase in budget authority in the bill. The amendment is not in order under Section 3J3 of House Resolution 5, 112th Congress, which states, "It shall not be in order to consider an amendment to a general appropriations bill proposing a net increase in budget authority in the bill unless considered en bloc with another amendment or amendments proposing an equal or greater decrease in such budget authority pursuant to Clause 2F of Rule 21. The amendment proposes a net increase in budget authority in the bill in violation of such section. I ask for a ruling of the Chair.
Other member wish to be heard on the point of order? If not, the Chair will rule. The gentleman from Iowa makes a point of order that the amendment offered from the gentleman from New York violates Section 3J3 of House Resolution 5. Section 3J3 establishes a point of order against an amendment proposing a net increase in budget authority in the pending bill. The Chair has been persuasively guided by an estimate from the Chair of the Committee on the Budget that the amendment proposes a net increase in budget authority in the bill. Therefore, the point of order is sustained. The amendment is not in order. Clerk will continue to read.
Page 346, line 19, Section 2203, the level for each of the following accounts, $0. Section 2204, the level for Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration Research, Engineering, and Development, $146,828,000. Section 2205, the level for Department of Transportation, Federal Transit Administration, Capital Investment Grants, $1,569,092,000. Section 2206, the level for Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration Rail Line Relocation and Improvement Program, $15 million. Section 2207, the level for Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration Capital and Debt Service Grants to the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, $850 million.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 43, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Sessions of Texas.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise this morning to offer an amendment to H.R. 1, which would decrease the amount the federal government subsidizes Amtrak by $446,900,000. In 2008, the Pew Charitable Trust Foundation performed a study of Amtrak services. According to that study, the 20 most egregious, inefficient train lines run an annual deficit of between $4.9 and $59.4 million per year, with many operating at a 100% loss. My amendment would decrease the spending authority to Amtrak by the amount equal to those lines' losses. Mr. Chairman, in 1997, Congress passed what was referred to as the Amtrak Reform and Accountability Act, which requires that Amtrak operate without any federal assistance after 2002. By the way, that was 8 years ago, Mr. Chairman. It has never reached the intended level of self-sufficiency. It is time that Congress stop supporting these failed rail lines. It is important to the taxpayers of this country, Mr. Chairman. Instead, by eliminating these very inefficient and seldom used lines, Amtrak can focus on its core competency of urban and suburban transportation. For example, the Acela line, which operates along the Northeast Corridor, continually operates in a self-sufficient manner. We need to shift Amtrak's focus to the things that it does well, not the extremely inefficient long-distance line it fails to operate within the budget. Mr. Chairman, Amtrak has proven to be a money-losing venture that the government can no longer sustain and support. In 2008 alone, Amtrak lost $1.1 trillion. I didn't believe it, but that's what it says here. At a time of record debt and deficit, this amendment stops wasteful spending and directs the entire $446,900,000 to the spending reduction account to help pay down the debt. We must operate within some sense of business operation of common sense. I urge my colleagues to support this common sense amendment to reduce the federal spending, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. The underlying bill that we have before us has profoundly limits the transportation options that are available for the American people and imposes deep cuts upon the very programs of the greatest potential for creating jobs and that provide the necessary foundation for a strong economic recovery depend. The underlying bill terminates, completely defunds, the high-speed rail, intercity passenger rail program that was authorized under the PREA rail safety bill in the fall of 2008 and signed by then-President Bush. That's 28 months ago. It rescinds under those items that were in the Recovery Act, in the legislation that was passed in February of 2009, the Recovery Act, when it rescinds all of the unobligated funds from that Recovery Act, and it rescinds in the high-speed rail program the $2.5 billion of grants that were awarded in September of last year that were passed in the December 2009 2010 appropriations bill. Those grants were awarded but have not yet been obligated. It also happens to shut down all of the new funding for light rail and commuter rail and bus rapid transit, only providing money for those projects already in place that have received full funding grant agreements. They have contracts of that sort. There is funding in the underlying legislation to do that in the area of the Federal Transit Administration. It also cancels all of the Tiger grants, the so-called Tiger grants, which were part of the fiscal year 10 legislation. Some $600 million over 76 projects in 40 different states, which were awarded money from among 1,000 projects that claimed, that asked for $20 billion, showing the enormous need that was perceived on the part of the country. All of that on the Tiger grants in the 2010 budget are matched by local funds. It's not all federal funds, as were the ARA monies, but it's matched, has to be matched at the local level. It's not cookie cutter. It is not ordered by Beltway bureaucrats or anything like that. It's projects that grew out of the planning and the intent on the part of the states or the cities or the regional transit agencies to get good projects done. All of these are job-killing cuts, terminations and rescissions. Every one that I have mentioned that is done in the underlying legislation. All of these are part of the $7 billion reduction in transportation construction for infrastructure, for transportation infrastructure, that have been removed from the terminated, rescinded, cuts that have been removed from our construction industry, which is suffering from 30 to 40% unemployment. They represent at least 280,000 jobs, 280,000 man-years of work for that construction industry suffering from 30 to 40% unemployment. And this is at a time when bids are coming in at 20% below the estimates, the engineering estimates, for what they would cost. exactly the time that we should be doing those construction projects, putting those construction projects out for bid.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. What purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
First of all, I yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Now, I have finally gotten to the amendment from the gentleman from Texas. The underlying bill before us actually provides $850 million, which covers both the debt service for the bonded debt of Amtrak and covers capital improvements. Now, we also have Amtrak, which was authorized for funding in the legislation, the PREA rail safety legislation, as signed by President Bush in September or October of 08. For the fiscal year 11, the authorization for debt service and for capital grants from that authorization is over $1.3 billion. So the amount that is in this bill, which happens to be at $850 million, is $450 million plus below the authorized amount for those items, and actually comes right on the enacted number for Amtrak for the same purposes, the debt service and the capital grants for new improvements and for improvements to whatever it is that is needed for state of good repair and such in Amtrak, mostly which is spent on the Northeast Corridor, which is where Amtrak owns all the trackage. Most of that capital money is used in that kind of a way. That money already leads to 1,500 jobs which will be terminated at Amtrak at the $850 million level, and the gentleman's proposal is to cut another $446 million below that. That happens to leave us in a situation where there is almost no money left for Amtrak to operate, to do any capital program for the rest of the year, because they are committed to $270 million plus of debt service. Whereas if the gentleman's amendment were adopted, it would take $446 million out, leaving only $403 million left in the program. $270 is needed for the debt service, and $127 or $8 million has already, it changes as the days go on, has already been expended on state of good repair, service, and improvements in this fiscal year, as allowed under the CRs that we've worked under for now almost 5 months, so that there would be virtually no money, less than $5 million left for doing any of the kind of improvements, maintenance, the track work, if there are bridges that need to be done, or anything of that sort. So it virtually ends up with leaving them nothing to do for the kinds of emergencies and anything that would be otherwise planned for the rest of the year. Now, that, in fact, means then that Amtrak will, in fact, terminate another 1,000 jobs. So,
gentleman yield.
I will be happy to yield.
I find it very interesting that we're going to continue operating the service which costs the money, but if I took the money and stopped the service, we all of a sudden can't fix all the things that you want to fix. My gosh, the bottom line is they need to quit operating the service and then use it for what the gentleman says they should use the money for, of the bridges and the operating of the infrastructure.
The money
I thank the gentleman.
reclaiming it wasn't my time. I think we should have been trading it through Mr.
Go ahead.
Nadler. But the money is assigned to be used either for the payment for the service, the contract for the service itself, or the need for some subsidy on the service, which is a very small one on the operation for the Northeast Corridor, if any at all, and the rest of it is assigned clearly for debt service and for the capital program, which necessarily goes on, because if you don't do it and keep up with repairs when they are needed, then you end up with ever-growing repairs that put you out of business.
Reclaiming my time, I'd like to just point out, of course, what the gentleman from Massachusetts says is absolutely correct, but let me point out just a very...
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back.
I yield back.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Chairman, I ask for a call of the roll.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. Clerk will continue to read.
Page 348, line 3, Section 2208. The level Maritime Administration, Operations and Training, $155,750,000, Section 2209, of the prior year unobligated balances available for Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration, capital assistance for high-speed rail corridors and intercity passenger rail service.
Mr. Chairman.
For what purpose is the gentleman from Iowa rise?
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the remainder of the bill through page 357, line 22, be considered as read, printed in the record, and open to amendment at any time.
Is there an objection?
Object. And I move to strike the last word.
Objection is heard. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I'll yield to the gentleman from New York.
Thank you. I won't take the. I thank the gentleman for yielding. I won't take the 5 minutes, but I just wanted to complete a couple of comments on Amtrak from the discussion of the last amendment. That amendment, which has now been passed, I thought it wasn't on a voice vote, but which has been passed subject to a vote on the floor, presumably tomorrow, if adopted, will, as Mr. Over said, essentially eliminate all capital funding for Amtrak after debt service is taken care of. All capital funding. Now the question is raised, why should we spend money on Amtrak for capital funding when it loses money? Gentleman asked that. Well, the answer is almost no transportation modality in this country makes money. That's why we had to form Amtrak in the first place. You look at trucking, for instance. You look at trucking. We support the interstate highway system without which the trucks could operate. Now, someone may say, well, the trucks pay gasoline tax, diesel fuel tax. They support the highway system. Not really. One 18-wheeler of 70,000 pounds does 10,000 times the damage, the wear and tear, the vibration damage to a highway as an automobile. Yet the trucks don't pay 10,000 times the gasoline tax as the automobile driver does. If we asked them to do so, trucking would be uneconomic. I'm not suggesting we should, obviously, because we need a trucking industry. By the same token, we need rail transportation, because rail is 3 times as energy efficient per ton mile for freight. It's far more energy efficient, I don't have the figure, per passenger. We want to decrease our dependence on Middle Eastern oil. We want to have less of borrowing money from China to give it to Middle Eastern potentates who helped fund the other side in the war on terror. So we need more rail. The only way we can do that is by funding Amtrak, and Amtrak has to put money into capital improvements to a large extent because for 50 years there were no capital improvements on the passenger rail system. So an amendment like this is totally destructive because we must have in this country a choice for shippers, a choice for people of the modalities of transportation to make our economy more efficient and to make people's lives better so they don't sit on the highways in congestion all the time. So Amtrak is cheap enough, and for $850 million for the entire country, which is much too small. It should have been the $1.3 billion, which was the authorized level. We should maintain that level and certainly not go, well, we shouldn't have that level. We should have $1.3 billion, but the CR is bad enough taking it to $850, which only allows a couple $100 million for capital for the balance of the year. We certainly shouldn't bring it down essentially to zero by adopting the amendment that we just voice voted, which will come up to a vote on the floor tomorrow. I thank the gentleman and I yield back.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Clerk will continue to read.
Page 348, line 22, section 2210.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the remainder of the bill through page 357, line 22, be considered as read, printed in the record, and open to amendment at any point.
Is there an objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Are there any amendments to that portion of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk, number 68.
Clerk will designate the amendment. The clerk will first read that section.
Division C, Stimulus Recessions, Section 3001, there are hereby rescinded all unobligated balances remaining available as of February 11, 2011 of the discretionary appropriations provided by Division A of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk, number 68.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 68, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Polis of Colorado.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm proud to offer this amendment with my colleague from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, a strong advocate for common sense policies. Mr. Chairman, this amendment simply changes the date by which the bill rescinds obligated funds. By moving the date to the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, it allows for everyone from local government to innovative clean tech companies the ability to plan for the rest of their fiscal year and not have grants yanked from under their feet. We should not change the rules on people in the middle of the game. It really calls into question the reliability of the federal government. There are so many grants in the queues of these agencies, and recalling all funds unobligated after February 11th will be devastating to local communities and small businesses that are just looking for long-term stability throughout the rest of the fiscal year. Changing the rules after the fact is never a strong good practice. Mr. Chairman, this amendment is pro-business, pro-infrastructure, pro-local government, and deserves to be supported. The amendment is also fiscally responsible and meets the House budget rules. My state of Colorado provides an example as to why this date should be changed. Colorado was awarded a $10 million Tiger-TIFIA challenge grant through the Recovery Act. That expands one of the most heavily used and heavily congested highways in our state, creating jobs, fostering economic development, multimodal transportation, the lifeblood of my congressional district and the greater state of Colorado. This $10 million investment helps leverage additional funds in the area, creating $276 million in employment income and over 7,200 jobs. To date, only $900,000 has been obligated, and because the CR rescinds all unobligated funding across the board without thought to details or individual projects, we risk never seeing the remaining $9.1 million that they were promised. And because of that, they could lose $300 million in local funding contingent on the stability provided by the Tiger grant. For the businesses and residents in Colorado, this is simply ridiculous and just doesn't make sense. How could we rescind a small government grant, not an earmark? We've moved away from earmarks, and I've supported that. But what they get replaced by are grants, merit-based opportunities for our projects to compete for federal funds. How could we rescind a grant which, through local and state ingenuity, they've already leveraged into $300 million in local, state, and private funding? That is not fiscally responsible. I'm hopeful that this was merely an oversight by the committee, and I hope that they will work with me to address this issue. The process to leverage $10 million into $305 million takes time. Colorado was awarded the Tiger-TIFIA Challenge Grant in February 2010, and Colorado and other states were challenged to think bigger and do more with less. But Colorado was the only state to accept that challenge, Many of the other funds have already been obligated under TIFIA. So because they're doing what we wanted them to do, being creative and leveraging the capital, unless we make this change, they could be punished. Colorado's U.S. 36 application did not anticipate a TIFIA loan, but Colorado and the U.S. 36 quarter embraced the challenge. And the application is in. The obligation is expected by September of 2011, consistent with the intention of the challenge grant in the first place. Mr. Chairman, in addition, my amendment would ensure that the long process of applying for a loan guarantee at the Department of Energy, not a grant, simply a loan in this tight credit market, would not mean projects already in the queue would be thrown out. How can we tell a private company to spend time and money applying for something, have it awarded, and then turn around and take it off the table? That's simply bad for business. Similar programs at the World Bank and IMF treat the loan authority authorized by Congress as obligated funds once they're appropriated. We owe it to our small businesses and local governments to provide predictability with regard to federal funding streams. As we move towards grant-based programs, it's critical that people trust and believe in that the federal word is good. I believe that these provisions in the CR run contrary to that, and I ask my colleagues to work with me to address this issue. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
I rise to strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, H.R. 1 attempts to save the American taxpayer on a number of fronts. First, we cut $100 billion from regular government spending. Second, we went a step further for the taxpayer by rescinding the remaining balances of the failed stimulus bill, about $5 billion if we act now. We need to act now to stop any more funds from being spent. The longer we wait, the longer we let the administration shop around with the taxpayers' hard-earned money. Further, we were told that the stimulus bill was the lightning bolt that would put America back to work right away. If these funds haven't been already obligated, when are the people going back to work? Where's the instant impact? Where are the jobs? Unemployment is still over 9% in many areas of the country and upwards of 15% in other sections. If the funds have not been obligated by now, they probably weren't meant to be in the stimulus package. Let's save the taxpayers $5 billion today and rescind these funds now. I urge a no vote.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to commend again and congratulate the gentleman from Colorado for offering this amendment, and I want to support this amendment, though I realize the realities of the situation that we are in. In the recovery bill, which we could have a long discussion about the word failure of the recovery bill, but we won't go into that at this time of night. The items which were ready, the so-called projects that were ready to go into construction right away, those were designated with a termination date. The work had to be done by the end of 2010, and those monies that were for shovel-ready projects have all been expended completely in the process. For the longer-term investments, which the high-speed rail program and the Tiger Grant program were part, those were always intended to go farther. Never was it suggested that they could be done and the work done that would produce the jobs necessary in less than at least 2011 and 2012 as well. So what has been proposed for the Tiger Grant here and all of the Tiger Grants put them in quite a different category. The gentleman's amendment highlights an example of how the majority's rhetoric and political posturing on the continuing resolution comes at the expense of good policy. If you presented this project that the gentleman from Colorado has put forward to a member on the other side of the aisle, they agree that the use of a $10 million grant to leverage over $200 million in non-federal funds is a perfect example of the potential for public-private partnerships. But the moment you mention the project's genesis within the President's Recovery Act, their tune turns to righteous condemnation. More broadly, there are other projects across the country that would be impacted by the rescissions' political intent. In particular, efforts to address congestion that is choking our transportation network through the creation of a 21st century high-speed rail system would be halted in many regions. For example, $110 million to improve connections to Amtrak's Northeast Corridor within the nation's most densely populated region is also caught up in the same problem that the gentleman from Colorado is talking about. So it would be an entirely rational thing to allow the ARA funds to be implemented until September 30th, 2011, as has been suggested, and I support the gentleman's amendment.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Clerk will continue to read.
Page 358, line 9, Section 3002, no federal agency administering funds provided by Division A of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 may provide funding or reimbursement to any entity awarded funds. Division D, miscellaneous provisions, spending reduction, Section 4001, spending reduction account. The amount by which each applicable allocation of new budget authority made by the Committee on Appropriations exceeds the amount of related proposed new budget authority is as follows. 1. Agricultural, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration and related agencies, $1,972,000,000.
Chairman?
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
I move the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion to rise. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 1, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 1 and has come to no resolution thereon.
Speaker?
For what purpose the gentleman from Utah rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns to meet at 9 a.m. today.
Without objection. Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House now do adjourn.
The question is on. Should the motion to adjourn? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. today.
It was another late night in the House, the Chamber continuing work on federal funding for 2011. Members voted on a number of amendments